I'm Greg Grugan in Houston.
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin.
And I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas, and this is Texas, The Issue Is.
With just 16 days left until the midterm, we are taking a hard look at the Lone Star State's electoral landscape with highly regarded Rice political analyst and pollster, Mark Jones. Mark, let's get right to it. Democrat Beto O'Rourke has been struggling mightily to close the gap with incumbent Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Any indication he's moving into striking distance?
Really not too much. Beto's been down by about 6 to 10 points, depending on how you calculate turnout and vote intention, but he hasn't been able to narrow the gap. And as we get closer and closer to Election Day, I think we're looking at another Greg Abbott victory and Beto O'Rourke defeat, with the only real question that remains is, does he lose by 5 or 6 points or 10 or 12 points?
Mark, we know that the polls in 2016 were wrong. We know the polls in the Perry Hutchinson primary were very, very wrong. How confident are we right now that we're not just going to get some type of November surprise, and maybe that surprise comes down ballot?
Well, not all the polls were wrong in 2020. The Hobby School poll that we ran had Donald Trump winning by 5.2%. He won by 5.6%. Although, your point taken, some of the other polls were quite off, predicting a Biden victory. I think we have enough polls showing us the same thing, that is Greg Abbott winning by a large enough margin that he shouldn't have any problems. As you get down ballot, that becomes much more of a partisan vote. And we know in Texas, the Republicans start off with a 6 to 8 to 10 point advantage. And right now, I don't see any indication that any of those down ballot Republicans, at least in the statewide races, are going to lose.
Mark, I'll say from the jump, my home state of Georgia politics is different than Texas politics. But with that in mind, the first 2 days of early voting in Georgia were record turnout. I mean, beating midterm numbers from 2018 and 2020 numbers to a certain extent. Do you think that could be an indication that early voting, just in general, and specifically here in Texas, may be at record levels?
Well, early voting's been on the rise for the past few election cycles. In 2020, close to 90% of Texans voted early. And I think we're likely to see something like that again. I would expect we're going to have record turnout for a midterm, somewhere around 10 million, but we probably aren't going to get up to the levels that we had in 2020, which were around 11 million.
Mark, as you just said, midterms are about turnout, and the African-American vote in Texas is critical to Democratic hopes. In 2020, there were energizing factors like Trump and George Floyd. Are you detecting any fall off?
What we're seeing right now is, for Democrats, obviously the African-American vote is crucial. Democrats win about 9 out of 10 of every African-American vote. So if African-American turnout dips, that's going to adversely affect Democrats. Right now, I think we're looking at more normal levels of African-American turnout, not spikes, but not depressed levels, but probably 2 or 3 points below where they would be in a high water mark, such as the 2008 Obama election.
Mark, let's build on that. Are there any signs that you're seeing of voter apathy that you can detect in any of the recent polls? You know, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of anger early on, especially with the abortion ruling that came out. But what about now? Is there a wider scale apathetic movement that you feel?
Well, I think what we're seeing is among the voters who rarely turn out to vote, who might have been mobilized by the Dobbs decision or the Uvalde massacre or something else, they're going back to their sort of norm of not voting. But the people who frequently vote in presidential elections and in midterms, they're enthused and they're going to be turning out. So I think we are going to see strong turnout. The trick for Democrats will be, can they get Generation Z, younger voters, to turn out? The more those younger voters turn out, the better Democrats are going to do.
Mark, it appears the demographics, the targeted demographic in these political ads, especially from the Beto O'Rourke campaign and the Greg Abbott campaign, has been targeting Latinos, Hispanic voters. Do you think Democrats are neglecting the African-American vote? Do you think they're just assuming that all black voters or a majority of black voters are just going to take the Democrat and Beto side?
I think that's the assumption, is that African-American voters are going to vote overwhelmingly Democratic, so that the Democratic Party doesn't, and their candidates don't have to do as much to convince them to vote Democratic or even to mobilize them. They're much more concerned about getting younger Latino voters to turn out to vote and vote Democratic. That can come back to haunt you. Carol Robinson, a professor at Texas Southern University, made that point during the Texas Democratic Party convention, that Texas Democrats take African-American voters for granted at their peril.
All right, stay with us. The Fox Texas Trio and Mark Jones will be back with us after this break.